September 17th, 1985, 6:43 p.m., Stockholm, Sweden. The temperature hovers at 11 degrees Celsius as dusk settles over Södermalm district. A man in a dark blue Swedish police uniform stands outside apartment building 47 on Götgatan Street, his breath visible in the autumn air. His badge catches the streetlight. Regulation issue. Serial number K7739, identical to those carried by Stockholm's police district officers. He checks his watch. A Pobeda, Soviet-made, but concealed beneath the cuff of his regulation police jacket. The watch face shows 1843. In Moscow, it is 2043. He has 17 minutes. Inside apartment 3B, 7-year-old Anna Karin Bergstrom sits at the kitchen table, coloring a drawing of her family's summer cottage in Dalarna. Her mother, Margarita, a low-level administrative assistant at the Swedish Ministry of Defense, is working late again, the third time this week. Anna Karin's babysitter, Mrs. Lindqvist from 2A, has stepped out to her own apartment to retrieve a board game. The girl is alone for perhaps 90 seconds. The doorbell rings. Anna Karin knows she shouldn't answer. But the doorbell rings again, urgent now, and through the peephole, she sees the dark blue uniform, the silver badge, the serious expression of authority. She recognizes the uniform from school visits, from the friendly officers who taught them about bicycle safety. "Police," the man says in perfect Swedish, his accent carrying the flat, precise quality of Skåne County in southern Sweden. "There's been an accident. Your mother asked me to bring you to the hospital." The girl's hand moves toward the chain lock. The second hand on the Soviet watch sweeps forward. Somewhere in the building, Mrs. Lindqvist searches through her hall closet for the Monopoly box. On Götgatan Street below, evening traffic flows past. Volvo sedans, delivery trucks, a blue and white police Saab that will turn the corner in 45 seconds and continue north, away from apartment building 47. Anna Karin slides the chain free. What happens in the next 11 minutes will remain classified by Swedish security services for 32 years. What happens in the next 11 minutes will trigger the largest counterintelligence operation in Swedish history, codenamed Operation Fimbulvinter. What happens in the next 11 minutes will expose a KGB program so audacious, so coldly calculated, that even seasoned CIA analysts reading the declassified reports in 2017 will sit back from their desks, momentarily unable to continue. The man in the police uniform steps into the apartment. The door closes behind him. Mrs. Lindqvist finds the Monopoly box. The police Saab turns north on Götgatan, its officers unaware, discussing weekend plans, the younger one complaining about overtime schedules. The watch ticks forward. 16 minutes remain. The official story, as reported by Swedish newspapers on September 18, 1985, describes a custody dispute gone wrong. Margareta Bergstrom's ex-husband, the papers explain, hired someone to impersonate a police officer and attempt to take Anna Karin from her mother's custody. The child was recovered within hours, unharmed. The impersonator escaped. Police are investigating. The story occupies 4 column inches on page 7 of Dagens Nyheter, wedged between a report on municipal budget negotiations and an advertisement for Electrolux refrigerators. The Swedish security service, Säkerhetspolisen, known as SÄPO, issues no statement. The Soviet embassy on Gjörvelsgatan Street, just 2 kilometers north of the Bergstrom apartment, operates with its usual diplomatic routine. First Secretary Yuri Konstantinovich Morozov attends a reception at the Finnish embassy that evening, discussing timber trade agreements and smiling at appropriate intervals. His diplomatic credentials are impeccable. His command of Swedish is flawless. He has served in Stockholm for 3 years without incident. What both SÄPO and the KGB's Directorate S believe at this moment, on the evening of September 17, 1985, differs dramatically from what the newspapers report. But what they believe also differs dramatically from the truth, a truth that will take 3 years to fully uncover and 32 years to partially declassify. SÄPO believes they are dealing with a sophisticated KGB provocation, A test of Swedish security responses, possibly connected to the ongoing investigation into the submarine incursions in Swedish territorial waters. They believe the target is Margareta Bergstrom because her administrative role at the Defense Ministry, while low level, gives her access to building layouts and personnel schedules. They believe this is about mapping Swedish security infrastructure. They are wrong. The KGB's Directorate S, the elite illegals directorate responsible for deep cover operations, believes they have executed a successful extraction of a critical asset under emergency protocol. They believe the operation, codenamed Snöstjärna, Snowstar, has proceeded exactly as rehearsed during 2 months of preparation. They believe the girl in the Pobeda sedan, now heading south toward Malmö, is precisely who they intended to extract. They are catastrophically wrong. Margareta Bergstrom, at her desk in the Defense Ministry at 1843, is not working late on defense matters. She is, in fact, not Margareta Bergstrom at all. Her real name is Maj-Britt Holmström, and for the past 4 years, she has been SÄPO's most successful double agent inside Sweden's small but active Soviet espionage network. Her cover story, divorced mother, administrative assistant, financially struggling, has been carefully constructed to make her attractive for KGB recruitment. Her actual role is to feed carefully curated misinformation to her KGB handler, a man she knows as Sven, but whose real identity is Major Konstantin Petrov, operating under the cover of a cultural attaché at the Soviet embassy. The Defense Ministry knows where she is. SÄPO knows where she is. But no one, not Holmström, not her SÄPO handlers, not Petrov, not even the woman currently playing Monopoly in apartment 2A, knows about Snöstjärna. Because Snöstjärna is not a SÄPO operation. It is not a KGB operation. It is a rogue initiative conceived and executed by a single KGB officer who has come to a terrible conclusion. His own service is penetrated at the highest levels, and the only way to protect a critical asset is to break protocol entirely. The officer's name is Yuri Morozov. The asset he believes he is protecting is not Anna Karin Bergstrom. It is his own daughter, born in Stockholm in 1978 to a Swedish woman named Ingrid Svensson, a relationship that should never have happened, that violated every regulation in the KGB handbook, that has haunted Morozov for 7 years. A daughter he has watched from a distance, never approaching, never acknowledging. A daughter whose existence he has concealed even from his wife in Moscow. Except the girl he has just taken from apartment 3B is not his daughter. His daughter, Katarina Svensson, lives in apartment 4C in the same building, directly above the Bergstrom residence. The apartments have identical layouts. The girls are the same age, same height, same blonde hair. Yuri Morozov, first secretary with diplomatic immunity, trained in surveillance detection and operational security, fluent in 5 languages, veteran of KGB operations in 3 countries, has taken the wrong child. By 1902, the Pobeda sedan has reached the E4 highway heading south. Morozov drives with meticulous attention to speed limits, his counterfeit police uniform now changed for civilian clothes. Gray slacks, dark sweater, forgettable and precisely Swedish. Anna Karin Bergstrom sits in the back seat, confused but not yet frightened. She has asked twice about her mother. Morozov has responded both times with calm reassurance. They are going to a different hospital, a special hospital. Her mother will meet them there. The girl does not know that the man driving her south has spent the last month mapping ferry schedules between Malmö and Copenhagen, memorizing the duty rotations of Swedish customs officers, identifying the blind spots in ferry terminal security cameras. She does not know that sewn into the lining of his overcoat is a Danish passport in the name of Henrik Andersen, complete with entry stamps from 3 previous business trips. She does not know that in 48 hours, she is scheduled to board an Aeroflot flight from Copenhagen to East Berlin under the name Katarina Andersen, traveling with her father to visit relatives. What Morozov does not know, what he cannot know, because he has maintained such careful distance from his daughter's life, is that Katarina Svensson was at her school's gymnastics practice until 1900 o'clock, and is currently walking home with her mother Ingrid, discussing what they should have for dinner. What Morozov does not know is that at 1851, Mrs. Lindqvist returned to apartment 3B to find it empty and immediately called the police emergency number. What he does not know is that the real Swedish police, not the KGB's meticulously researched version, but the actual, chaotic, unpredictable Stockholm police force, have already broadcast an alert for a missing 7-year-old girl and a possible police impersonator driving an unknown vehicle. What Morozov does not know is that SAPO, monitoring communications at the Soviet embassy as part of their surveillance of Maj-Britt Holmström's operation, have intercepted an urgent encrypted message sent at 1915 from the embassy to Moscow Center. The message uses a cipher that SAPO's cryptanalysts recognize from previous intercepts related to Directorate S operations. The message is marked Priority 1. The message mentions Snustjarna. The cipher remains unbroken, but the urgency is unmistakable. SAPO's operational commander, Deputy Director Eric Nordstrom, makes a decision that will be debated in Swedish intelligence circles for decades. He orders simultaneous surveillance on all known Soviet intelligence officers in Stockholm, including Yuri Morozov. The surveillance teams deploy at 1923, precisely as Morozov's Pobeda sedan passes through Norrköping, maintaining exactly 90 kilometers per hour, attracting no attention whatsoever. Except Morozov is already gone. The Pobeda sedan belongs to a friend at the Soviet trade mission, borrowed that morning with a story about needing to drive to Uppsala for an academic meeting. The surveillance teams will track it to an apartment building in Vasastan, where it sits parked and empty, where it will remain parked and empty until morning, when its owner will discover it and call the police, confused and alarmed, insisting he knows nothing about missing children or rogue operations. Morozov is driving a Volvo 240, Swedish registration plates, purchased for cash 3 weeks earlier from a used car dealer in Västerås, under the name Henrik Andersson. The Volvo is methodical, unremarkable, Swedish to its core. It is the perfect vehicle for disappearing. The truth, when it begins to emerge, comes not from Swedish or Soviet intelligence services, but from a 13-year-old girl named Lisa Holm, who is practicing her photography near the Götgatan intersection at 1841 on September 17th. Lisa is using her new Minolta camera, a birthday present, and she is trying to capture the way the streetlights create patterns on the wet pavement after the afternoon rain. She takes 12 photographs that evening. 11 of them show various angles of streets, lights, and architectural details of Södermalm. The 12th photograph shows a man in a police uniform standing outside apartment building 47, checking his watch. The photograph is slightly out of focus. Lisa is still learning about shutter speed, but it is clear enough. The timestamp on the negative, when developed 3 days later, confirms 1841. Lisa's mother, viewing the prints, notices the police officer and asks why Lisa was photographing police. Lisa explains she wasn't photographing him specifically. She was photographing the light patterns, and he happened to be in the frame. Lisa's mother mentions this to a neighbor, who mentions it to her sister, who works as a secretary at SAPO headquarters in Kungsholmen. The sister, knowing nothing of Operation Fimbulvinter or Snustjarna, but having heard canteen gossip about a missing child and a fake police officer, mentions the photograph to her supervisor. The supervisor, a methodical man with 20 years in counterintelligence, requests the photograph through formal channels. The photograph arrives at SAPO headquarters on September 21st, 4 days after the abduction. By this time, Anna Karin Bergström has been missing for 93 hours. By this time, the Soviet embassy has issued a formal diplomatic note protesting the harassment of their staff through unwarranted surveillance. By this time, Maj-Britt Holmström's cover as a double agent has been necessarily revealed to prevent her real daughter, her actual daughter, unrelated to the operation, from becoming a target. By this time, 3 different Soviet intelligence officers have been declared persona non grata and expelled from Sweden, none of them Yuri Morozov, whose disappearance from Stockholm on the evening of September 17th was not noticed by Swedish surveillance until September 19th because his apartment lights remained on and his car remained in the embassy parking garage, and his diplomatic colleagues, when asked, assumed he was working from home with a diplomatic flu. The photograph lands on the desk of Chief Analyst Gunnar Ekstrom at 14:30 on September 21st. Ekstrom is 56 years old, a veteran of Swedish counterintelligence since 1957, a man who remembers the Wennerström spy affair and has spent 3 decades studying Soviet operational methodology. He examines Lisa Holmes' slightly blurry photograph through a magnifying glass, noting the uniform details, the posture, the position outside the building. Then he notices the watch. The uniform is perfect. The badge is perfect. The shoes are regulation Swedish police issue. But the watch, visible because the man is checking the time, his left hand raised, his sleeve pulled back, is wrong. Swedish police officers wear Certina DS models, or occasionally Omega Seamasters. The watch in the photograph has a different shape, a distinctive square face that Ekstrom recognizes from intelligence briefings on Soviet equipment. Ekstrom picks up his phone and calls the Soviet desk. "Find me everything on Pobeda watches," he says. Manufacturing details, distribution patterns, who wears them. The research takes 6 hours. Pobeda watches are manufactured in Moscow at the First Moscow Watch Factory. They are not available in Swedish stores. They are not common among Soviet diplomatic personnel, who prefer to wear Western brands as status symbols. They are, however, standard issue for certain categories of Soviet military and intelligence personnel, particularly those operating in roles where Western luxury goods might seem inappropriate. Ekstrom makes his second call at 20:45. "I need a list," he tells the Soviet desk chief. "Every Soviet official in Stockholm. Cross-reference against anyone with military or intelligence background. Then narrow it to anyone who's disappeared or changed routine since September 17th. Yuri Morozov's name appears on the list at 21:30. His file is thin. First Secretary, Cultural Affairs, no suspected intelligence role, no concerning contacts. 3 years in Stockholm without incident. But he hasn't been seen since September 17th. His apartment lights are on a timer. His car is parked. His colleagues think he's sick, but no one has actually spoken to him." Ekstrom opens Morozov's diplomatic file. Born 1947, Leningrad. Married. 2 children in Moscow. Education. Leningrad State University. Degree in Scandinavian languages. Postings. Copenhagen, 1975 to 1978. Return to Moscow, 1978 to 1982. Stockholm, 1982. Present. Something about the timeline bothers Ekstrom. He calls the archives and requests all surveillance reports on Soviet diplomatic personnel from 1975 to 1978, specifically anything involving personal relationships with Swedish or Danish citizens. The report arrives at 03:20 on September 22nd. Ekstrom has been awake for 19 hours. The report is marked confidential and comes from Danish Security Service files, shared with Swedish counterparts in 1978 under Nordic intelligence cooperation protocols. In Copenhagen, during his posting from 1975 to 1978, Yuri Konstantinovich Morozov was observed in a relationship with a Swedish au pair named Ingrid Svensson. The relationship continued for approximately 8 months. Danish surveillance ended when Morozov returned to Moscow. No follow-up was conducted because the relationship appeared to have ended naturally and presented no immediate security concerns. Ingrid Svensson. Ekstrom types the name into Sapo's database. 3 matches appear. He eliminates 2 immediately. Wrong ages, wrong circumstances. The third, Ingrid Maria Svensson, born 1956, currently residing in Stockholm, Götgatan 47, apartment 4C, the same building. Ekstrom's hand moves to the phone, then stops. It is 03:35. He needs to think clearly. He needs to understand what he's seeing. If Morozov had a relationship with Ingrid Svensson in 1977 to 1978, and if she now lives in Stockholm, and if there was a child, he pulls up building records for Götgatan 47. Ingrid Svensson, 1 child, daughter Katarina, born April 1978, conceived in 1977, during Morozov's posting in Copenhagen, during his relationship with Ingrid Svensson. Ekstrom sits back. The pieces are arranging themselves, but they create a picture that makes no sense. If Morozov has a daughter in Stockholm, an illegitimate daughter, a security nightmare for a KGB officer, why would he wait 7 years to make contact? Why would he risk everything now? And why, if he's trying to extract his own daughter, would he take the wrong child? The answer, when it comes to Ekstrom at 04:15, is simple and terrible. Morozov doesn't know he took the wrong child. He thinks Anna Karin Bergstrom is Katarina Svensson, which means Morozov doesn't know his daughter as well as he thinks he does, which means he's been watching from a distance, too far away to distinguish between 2 blonde 7-year-old girls in similar apartments in the same building, which means this isn't an authorized KGB operation, because an authorized operation would have better intelligence, would have confirmed the target's identity, would have dozens of surveillance reports and photographs and certainty. This is one man, operating alone, operating desperately, operating on incomplete information and parental fear, and the conviction that his daughter is in danger. The question Ekstrom cannot answer at 4:15 on September 22nd is, why does Morozov think his daughter is in danger? What does he believe is about to happen? And most critically, is he right? The answer is in Moscow, in a locked safe in the Lubyanka building, headquarters of the KGB. The document is classified Special Importance and carries the designation Directiva 847-S85. It is dated August 29, 1985, 19 days before Anna Karin Bergstrom is taken from her mother's apartment. Directiva 847-S85 orders the immediate termination of all compromised intelligence relationships in Scandinavia, with particular focus on Sweden and Denmark. The directive is a response to the defection of KGB Major Oleg Gordievsky in July 1985, a defection that has exposed multiple Soviet operations across Western Europe. The directive specifically mentions Swedish operations, though it does not list them by name. The directive's implementation schedule calls for appropriate measures to be completed by October 1st, 1985. Yuri Morozov receives a copy of Directiva 847-S85 on September 3rd, delivered through routine diplomatic pouch to the Soviet embassy in Stockholm. As first secretary, he handles diplomatic correspondence and has access to certain classified materials, though he is not officially part of the Residentura, the KGB station operating under diplomatic cover. He is not supposed to see this directive, but the diplomatic pouch is misrouted by a careless clerk, and for 45 minutes on the afternoon of September 3rd, Directiva 847-S85 sits on Morozov's desk among routine cultural affairs documents. Morozov reads it. More specifically, he reads Appendix C, which lists categories of compromised relationships requiring resolution. Category 7 on the list: all dependents or potential dependents of Soviet personnel not resident in USSR territory. Morozov understands immediately. His relationship with Ingrid Svensson is not in any official file. Concealed it successfully in 1977 to 1978, and the Danish surveillance reports were never shared with Soviet security services. But Gordievsky's defection has created panic in Moscow. The KGB is purging anything that could represent a vulnerability, anything that could be used for blackmail, anything that connects Soviet personnel to Western civilians. If Moscow discovers he has a daughter in Stockholm, a daughter he has never reported, a daughter whose existence represents a catastrophic security violation, the consequences will extend far beyond his own career. The appropriate measures mentioned in Directiva 847 S85 are, Morozov understands with cold clarity, not limited to diplomatic expulsions or reassignments. He has until October 1st. Morozov begins planning immediately. He cannot involve the Residentura. They would be obligated to report to Moscow. He cannot involve Swedish authorities. His diplomatic status would be revoked. His access to his daughter permanently severed. He must act alone, must extract Katerina before Moscow's appropriate measures can be implemented, must get her somewhere safe, where the KGB cannot reach her. The plan that takes shape over 2 weeks in September is audacious, improvised, and desperate. Morozov will take Katerina from her apartment, transport her to Denmark using forged documents, then arrange for her to be placed with a Swedish family in Denmark under a new identity. He will not tell Ingrid. She might panic, might contact authorities, might compromise everything. He will execute the operation quickly, cleanly, then return to Stockholm and resume his duties as though nothing has happened. By the time anyone realizes Katerina is missing, she will be safe, untraceable, beyond Moscow's reach. What Morozov does not consider, because he is planning in isolation, because he has no one to check his assumptions. How does he know which apartment Katerina is in? He has watched the building from a distance, has seen a blonde girl entering and leaving apartment 3B multiple times. He has never approached close enough to confirm her identity. He assumes, a fatal assumption, that the girl he has observed is his daughter. He has also not considered that Ingrid Svensson, protective of her daughter's routine, might have told Katerina about the strange man she noticed near their building in August, a man who seemed to be watching. He has not considered that Katerina, warned by her mother about strangers, has been careful about staying near other children, about walking home with friends, about never being alone in the building's hallway or stairwell. The irony, when it becomes clear to Ekstrom on the morning of September 22nd, is almost unbearable. Morozov's careful surveillance has been focused on the wrong target, and his careful timing, waiting until the girl is alone in the apartment, has been defeated because Katerina is never alone in her apartment. Anna-Karin Bergstrom, 1 floor below, Philo's different routine, has a working mother, has a babysitter who sometimes steps out for minutes at a time. Morozov has been watching Gottgarten 47 for weeks. He has mapped the routines, the patterns, the timing. He has assembled a perfect operational plan, but he has been watching the wrong apartment, drawing conclusions from incomplete data, and his plan, executed with precision and care, has extracted the wrong child. The Volvo 240 reaches Malmö at 23:47 on September 17th. Morozov drives through the city carefully, aware that he is now beyond the point of return, aware that every kilometer south represents another layer of complication if the operation unravels. Anna-Karin has fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted by confusion and fear. Morozov checks his mirrors constantly, watches for police vehicles, maintains exactly 50 kilometers per hour through urban streets. At 00:15 on September 18th, he parks the Volvo in a residential area, 3 kilometers from the ferry terminal. He wakes Anna-Karin gently, tells her they are stopping to rest before continuing to the hospital. The girl is disoriented, frightened, beginning to cry. Morozov speaks to her in Swedish, using the calm, authoritative tone that worked in the apartment, but the authority is failing now. The girl wants her mother. She wants to go home. Morozov makes a decision that will later be analyzed extensively by both Swedish and Soviet intelligence services. He stops at a telephone booth at 0042. He leaves Anna-Karin locked in the Volvo. He has no choice. She might run. And makes a call to a number in Copenhagen. The call lasts 90 seconds. Swedish telephone records, pulled 2 days later, will show the number belongs to a Danish export-import company that serves as a KGB cutout, used for communications when normal diplomatic channels are unavailable. What Morozov says in those 90 seconds is not recorded. But Swedish analysts, reconstructing the operation, conclude he is calling for help, asking for the Danish end of the extraction to be activated, confirming that he is on schedule to catch the 0630 ferry from Malmö to Copenhagen. He may be reporting success. He may be asking for reassurance. He may, though this seems less likely, be experiencing doubt about what he has done. When Morozov returns to the Volvo, Anna Karin is screaming. She has been screaming for perhaps 60 seconds, loud enough that a light has come on in a nearby apartment. Morozov gets into the driver's seat, starts the engine, pulls away smoothly, and without haste. The light in the apartment window goes dark. No one calls the police. It is late, and people assume domestic disputes, crying children. The ordinary disturbances of ordinary life. Morozov drives to a small hotel on the outskirts of Malmö, the kind of place that caters to truck drivers and traveling salesmen, where clerks don't ask questions and rooms are paid for in cash. He checks in at 0115 under the name Henrik Anderson. He tells the Mults, clerk, his daughter has had a difficult day, a family emergency. They need rest before catching an early ferry. The clerk, a tired man in his 60s, nods sympathetically and hands over the key to room 14. In room 14, Morozov faces a problem he did not anticipate during his careful planning. Anna Karin Bergström is not his daughter. She does not trust him. She does not believe his explanations. She is crying steadily now, asking for her mother, asking when they can go to the hospital, asking why they are in a hotel room instead of with Mama. Morozov has prepared for many contingencies. He has not prepared for this one. His daughter, his real daughter, Katarina, would presumably recognize him, would presumably understand at some level that he is her father, would presumably cooperate. But Anna Karin is a stranger's child, abducted by a stranger, locked in a hotel room, terrified and confused. At 0230, Morozov makes his second critical error. He gives Anna Karin a sedative. It is a mild sedative, intended to help her sleep, to calm her fear. It is the same medication he has used himself occasionally for travel anxiety. He crushes half a tablet into a glass of milk, tells her it will help her feel better. Anna Karin drinks the milk. She falls asleep within 20 minutes. This decision, to sedate the child, will become crucial evidence in the later investigation. It establishes premeditation, establishes that Morozov intended to transport her across international borders, establishes the seriousness of the abduction. It will also, in a strange way, save Anna Karin's life. Because at 0315 on September 18th, Säpo's operational team, working through the night, receives information from Swedish telecommunications authorities. A call made at 0042 from a telephone booth in Malmö to a number in Copenhagen, a number that appears in Säpo's database as suspected KGB cutout. The call originated from a booth near the Malmö ferry terminal. Eric Nordstrom, receiving this information at 0340, understands immediately. If the abductor is heading for Denmark, if he is using KGB communication channels, this is not a custody dispute. This is a Soviet operation. And if it is a Soviet operation moving toward Danish territory, they have perhaps 3 hours before the subject crosses international borders and escapes Swedish jurisdiction. Nordstrom calls the Malmö police at 0345. He provides descriptions: the missing girl, the suspected vehicle, the probable target location. He does not mention the KGB. He does not mention Morozov. He simply says, child abduction, subject possibly heading for Copenhagen ferry, highest priority. Malmö police deploy at 0402. They have 6 patrol units and 90 minutes to search a city of 250,000 people for a Volvo 240 sedan, one of the most common vehicles in Sweden, driven by a man whose appearance is unknown and who might be anywhere within 50 kilometers by now. The search is systematic and, by Swedish standards, aggressive. Police units check ferry terminal parking areas, check hotels near the terminal, check residential streets within walking distance. At 0452, A patrol unit spots a Volvo 240 parked on Lundewagen, 3 kilometers from the terminal. The registration matches the alert. The patrol officer radios in, approaches the vehicle cautiously, confirms it is empty. At 05:10, police begin checking nearby hotels. There are 14 hotels and boarding houses within 1 kilometer of where the Volvo is parked. At 05:27, an officer enters the Strandbaden Hotel on Kungsmarksgaten and speaks with the night clerk. The clerk remembers the man with the daughter who checked in after midnight, heading for an early ferry. Room 14. 4 officers approach room 14 at 05:35. They knock. No response. They knock again. Identify themselves as police. Still no response. At 05:38, the hotel manager opens the door with a master key. The room is empty. The bed has been slept in. The bathroom shows signs of use. On the nightstand is an empty glass with milk residue, and scattered nearby are fragments of a crushed tablet. Anna Karin Bergstrom and Yuri Morozov are gone. What happens next unfolds in 2 parallel timelines that will not converge for another 72 hours. In timeline 1, Swedish police realize the subject has perhaps 30 minutes lead, is presumably heading for the Zo 630 ferry to Copenhagen. Officers rush to the terminal. The ferry is already boarding. Early morning freight trucks, a handful of passenger vehicles, some foot travelers. Police board the ferry, check passenger manifests, search vehicles. They find no Henrik Andersen, no 7-year-old girl matching Anna Karin's description. The ferry departs at 06:32, 2 minutes late, cleared by police who find nothing suspicious. In timeline 2, the true timeline, unseen and unsuspected. At 05:12 on September 18th, 90 minutes before Swedish police enter the Strandbaden Hotel, Yuri Morozov carries a sleeping Anna Karin Bergstrom out of room 14. He has been awake all night, watching the street through the window, and at 04:45, he saw police vehicles moving through the area in a pattern he recognizes as systematic search. He does not know how they found him so quickly. He does not know that his phone call to Copenhagen triggered alerts, that Sapo has connected him to the abduction, that the careful operational security he has maintained for 15 years has unraveled in 6 hours. He knows only that he must move, must deviate from the plan, must improvise. Morozov leaves through the hotel's rear exit, carrying Anna Karin wrapped in a blanket. She is heavily sedated, unresponsive, but breathing steadily. To any observer, she is simply a sleeping child being carried by a father who has an early flight to catch. No one observes. It is 05:02 on a dark Swedish morning, and the streets are empty. Morozov walks 4 blocks to a taxi stand. He wakes the driver of the first taxi, tells him he needs to get to Copenhagen urgently. His daughter is sick. They missed their ferry connection. He will pay double the standard fare. The driver, a Bosnian immigrant named Dragan Kovac, looks at the sleeping child, looks at the desperate father, and agrees. They drive south at 05:15, bypassing the ferry terminal entirely, heading for the Öresund coast. Morozov's revised plan is simple. Pay Kovac to drive them across the border at Hilly, enter Denmark by road instead of sea, reach Copenhagen by alternative route. It is riskier. Land borders have more scrutiny than ferry terminals, but police will be searching ferry passengers, not road traffic. The border crossing at Hilly processes them at 06:47. Swedish border guard checks Morozov's passport, Henrik Andersen, Danish citizen, and asks about the child. Morozov explains in fluent Danish that his daughter is unwell. They are returning home to Copenhagen from visiting relatives in Malmö. The guard looks at sleeping Anna Karin, notes that her passport photo matches reasonably well. Blonde hair, 7 years old, similar features. The guard stamps the passport and waves them through. Anna Karin Bergstrom enters Denmark at 06:48 on September 18th, 1985, under the name Katarina Andersen. Meanwhile, In Stockholm at 07:15, Gunnar Ekstrom receives confirmation that the Malmö operation has failed. The subject was not on the ferry. The hotel room was abandoned. The trail has gone cold. Ekstrom sits at his desk, thinking. Morozov knows police are searching. He knows the ferry was the obvious route. So he abandoned the obvious route and chose... what? Land border? Private boat? Wait in Malmö until search intensity decreases? Ekstrom calls the border police, orders heightened scrutiny on all Sweden-Denmark crossings, all passengers matching Morozov's description, traveling with young girls. The order goes out at 07:30. It arrives at the hilly border crossing at 07:45, 42 minutes after Morozov and Anna-Karin have already passed through. In Copenhagen at 08:30, Dragan Kovac drops his passengers at Nørreport station, accepts 1,800 Swedish kroner for the journey, nearly 3 times the standard fare, and drives away. Yuri Morozov, carrying Anna-Karin, enters the station, buys 2 tickets to Aalborg under the Anderson identities, and boards the 09:15 train. The plan is unraveling, but Morozov is adapting. Aalborg is far from Copenhagen, far from Swedish borders, a small city in northern Jutland, where Soviet presence is minimal and Danish security is relaxed. He has a contact there, a retired Swedish merchant seaman who moved to Denmark in 1978, who occasionally does small favors for certain Soviet personnel, usually involving mail forwarding or package storage. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would attract attention. The contact's name is Bertil Engström. He lives in a small apartment on the outskirts of Aalborg. He believes Morozov is a Soviet trade official who occasionally needs to store materials for business trips. He does not know Morozov is KGB. He does not know that in 9 hours he will open his door to find a desperate man carrying an unconscious child. The revelation begins to take shape on September 20th, 3 days after the abduction, when Ingrid Svensson walks into SAPO headquarters in Stockholm and asks to speak with someone about the missing girl from her building. The intake officer, a junior analyst named Christina Berg, takes Ingrid to an interview room. She explains that she lives at Götgatan 47, apartment 4C. She heard about the missing girl from 3B. She wants to know if there is any danger to her own daughter. Berg asks routine questions. Has Ingrid noticed anything suspicious? Any unusual people near the building? Any changes in routine? Ingrid mentions that in August, she thought she saw a man watching the building. She saw him several times over 2 weeks. She mentioned it to her daughter, told her to be careful about strangers. But she hasn't seen him since early September. Berg asks what the man looked like. Ingrid's description is vague. Middle-aged, dark hair, average height, well-dressed. But she adds one detail. He looked sad. I remember thinking that. He stood there, looking up at the building, like he was sad about something. Berg writes this down. Then she asks, "Do you know the Bergstrom family from 3B?" Ingrid nods. "A little. We say hello in the hallway. Our daughters are the same age." Something in Berg's expression changes. She asks, "How old is your daughter?" 7. She'll be 8 in April. Berg excuses herself and leaves the interview room. She finds Gunnar Ekström in the Operations Center Teater, where he has been running the investigation with minimal sleep for 72 hours. She tells him, "Sir, there's another 7-year-old girl in the building, born April 1978. Ekström stares at her. Then he reaches for the Morozov file, opens it to the page showing his Copenhagen posting dates. 1975 to 1978. His relationship with a Swedish woman. The relationship that ended when he returned to Moscow. "What's the mother's name?" Ekström asks. "Ingrid Svensson." The room becomes very quiet. 3 analysts stop working and turn to look at Ekström, understanding spreading across their faces as they piece together what their chief has just realized. Ekström picks up the phone and calls Deputy Director Nordstrom. "Sir," he says, "I think we've been investigating the wrong victim." The interview with Ingrid Svensson lasts 4 hours. She confirms the relationship with Yuri Morozov in 1977, confirms that Katerina is his daughter, confirms that she has had no contact with Morozov since 1978. She never told him about the pregnancy. She wanted no part of Soviet entanglements, wanted to raise her daughter in Sweden, wanted a normal life away from Cold War complications. Does Morozov know about Katerina? Ingrid doesn't think so. How could he know? She never told him, never contacted him after he left Copenhagen. But Ekstrom, assembling the timeline, realizes that Morozov has discovered the truth somehow. Maybe through chance surveillance, maybe through KGB research, maybe through some channel Ingrid doesn't know about. And having discovered he has a daughter, having read Directiva 847S85 and understood the danger, Morozov has decided to save her. Except he took the wrong child. The question that haunts Ekstrom as he leaves headquarters at 03 Hunquoc on September 21st, does Morozov know yet? Has he discovered his mistake? And if he has, what will he do? In Aalborg, Denmark, at 1845 on September 18th, Bertil Engström opens his door to find Yuri Morozov holding an unconscious child. Morozov's appearance is disheveled, his expression desperate. He speaks rapidly in Swedish. I need your help just for 2 days. Don't ask questions, please. Engström is 63 years old, a former merchant seaman who has lived in Aalborg for 7 years. He does not want trouble. He has helped Morozov with small matters, storing packages, forwarding mail, because the pay was good, and the request seemed innocent. This is not innocent, but Morozov is inside the apartment now, laying the child on Engström's sofa. The girl is breathing, but will not wake. Morozov is talking, explaining. His daughter, a medical condition. Swedish hospitals made mistakes. He is taking her to specialists in Denmark. Temporary custody dispute. Nothing illegal. Just needs a place to stay for 48 hours until the paperwork is resolved. Engström does not believe any of this. But Morozov reaches into his jacket and removes an envelope containing 25,000 Danish kroner, roughly 5 months' rent. He places it on the table and says, 2 days, that's all I need. Engström looks at the money. He looks at the unconscious child. He says, if police come, I don't know anything. Morozov nods. Police won't come, I promise. This promise, like so many of Morozov's certainties, is based on flawed assumptions. He believes Swedish police are still searching ferry terminals in Copenhagen. He believes Danish authorities have not been alerted. He believes he has successfully disappeared into Denmark's interior, beyond the reach of Swedish investigation. He is wrong on all counts. Sapo has contacted Danish Security Service, Politiets Efterretningstjeneste, known as PET, at 11 o'clock on September 18th. PET has placed alerts at all major transportation hubs in Denmark. PET has begun checking border crossing records. At 15:30 on September 19th, a PET analyst notices a Henrik Andersen entering Denmark at Hilly on the morning of September 18th, traveling with a young daughter. The passport seems legitimate, but the analyst cross-references against Swedish alerts and finds a possible match. 7-year-old girl, blonde, traveling with male subject. PT requests the Swedish border guard's description of Henrik Andersen. The description matches Morozov's general appearance. PT requests photographs from the Hilly crossing security cameras. The photographs, grainy but usable, show a man carrying a child wrapped in a blanket. The man's face is partially visible. The child appears to be asleep. PT sends the photographs to Sapo at 18 Hunquoc on September 19th. Ekström receives them at 18:30. He compares the grainy photograph to Morozov's diplomatic file photo. The match is not definitive. The border crossing photo is poor quality, taken from an angle, partially obscured. But the resemblance is strong enough. Ekström calls pet liaison Henrik Janssen at 19 o'clock. The subject is in Denmark, he says, probably still traveling north from the border. Can you check internal transportation records? The search takes 12 hours. Danish police review train ticket sales, bus passenger manifests, taxi logs, At 07 o'clock on September 20th, they find a ticket purchase at Nurport Station. 2 tickets to Aalborg, purchased 09 o'clock on September 18th, paid in cash, no names required. Aalborg police receive the alert at 10:30 on September 20th. They begin checking hotels, boarding houses, private residences. The search is complicated by lack of specific descriptions. They are looking for a man with a 7-year-old girl, which describes dozens of tourists and traveling families. The break comes from an unexpected source. Dragan Kovac, the taxi driver, sees a newspaper article about the missing Swedish girl on September 21st. The article includes Anna Karin's photograph. Kovac recognizes the child he drove from Malmö to Copenhagen. He calls police at 14 Hundpåk, provides detailed information about the pickup location, the destination, the passenger's behavior. Copenhagen police forward this information to Aalborg at 15:30. Aalborg police now have a tighter timeline. Subject arrived by train 09 o'clock on September 18th, has been in Aalborg for approximately 72 hours. They begin checking rental properties, recent utility connections, anything indicating a new arrival in the city. At 19 Untuck on September 21st, 4 days after Anna Karin's abduction, an Aalborg police officer conducting door-to-door inquiries in residential neighborhoods speaks with a neighbor of Bertil Engström. The neighbor mentions seeing Engström with a visitor 2 days ago, a man carrying a sleeping child. The neighbor thought it odd because Engström typically lives alone, has no family visiting. Police approach Engström's apartment at 20:15. They knock. No answer. They knock again, identifying themselves. After 30 seconds, the door opens. Bertil Engström stands in the doorway, his expression resigned. "Is anyone else in the apartment?" the officer asks. Engström shakes his head. "They left this morning." The endgame unfolds across the next 48 hours with the inevitability of tragedy. Morozov, alerted by Engström that police inquiries have reached the neighborhood, abandons Aalborg at 11 on September 21st. He takes Anna Karin, still sedated, though more lightly now, waking for brief periods, before drifting back to sleep, and boards a bus heading west toward Göring, a smaller town near Denmark's northern coast. His plan has collapsed completely. He cannot return to Stockholm. His diplomatic immunity is certainly revoked by now. Arrest warrants issued. He cannot proceed to Moscow. Arriving with the wrong child would expose everything, trigger exactly the consequences he was trying to prevent. He cannot remain in Denmark. Police are clearly searching, the net tightening. At 15:30 on September 21st, on a rural bus traveling through Jutland farmland, Yuri Konstantinovich Morozov faces the reality he has been avoiding for 4 days. There is no escape route. There is no clever improvisation that will salvage this operation. He has destroyed his career, endangered his family, abducted an innocent child, and failed to save his daughter. Anna Karin wakes fully for the first time in 3 days. She looks around the bus, confused and frightened. She looks at Morozov and begins to cry. She wants her mother. She wants to go home. Morozov, for the first time since this operation began, sees Anna Karin clearly, not as an abstract target, not as an extraction subject, but as a terrified 7-year-old girl who has been ripped from her home and dragged across 2 countries by a stranger. He sees that she is not Katarina. He sees that she has never been Katarina. He sees what he has done. At 16 Untuck, the bus stops in Fredrikshavn, a port town on the Kattegat Strait. Morozov and Anna Karin get off. Morozov finds a telephone booth. He makes a call to Swedish authorities. Not SAPO, not police, but a crisis hotline number for missing children that he found in a Danish newspaper. The call is brief. Morozov speaks in Swedish, his voice steady despite exhaustion. The missing girl from Stockholm, Anna Karin Bergström, is at Fredrikshavn bus station in Denmark. She is unharmed. She needs to go home to her mother. The operator tries to keep him on the line, but Morozov hangs up. He walks Anna Karin to the bus station waiting area, sits her on a bench near the ticket counter where people will see her, and says, "Your mother is coming. Wait here." Then he walks out of the station. Anna Karin, too frightened and confused to move, sits on the bench. A station employee notices her after 3 minutes. A small girl, alone, disheveled, sitting very still. The employee approaches, asks if she is all right. Anna Karin begins to cry and says, "I want my mama." Police arrive at 16:20. Anna Karin is taken to Frederikshavn Hospital for examination. She is dehydrated, exhausted, showing effects of sedation, but physically unharmed. Swedish authorities are notified at 16:45. Margareta Bergström, the name by which Maj-Britt Holmström is still known to everyone except SAPO leadership, receives the call at 17 Hundquark and begins the journey to Denmark. Mother and daughter reunite at 22:30 on September 21st, 4 days and 4 hours after Anna Karin was taken from apartment 3B. The reunion occurs in a hospital room in Frederikshavn, with Swedish social services present, police present, SAPO observers present. Anna Karin runs to her mother. They hold each other. The room is silent except for the sound of a 7-year-old girl crying and a mother whispering reassurances. Outside the hospital, Gunnar Ekström stands with Danish police commander Lars Petersen. They discuss next steps: tracking Morozov, coordinating with Soviet authorities, determining whether this was a rogue operation or sanctioned KGB action. "Do you think he's still in Denmark?" Petersen asks. Ekström shakes his head. "He's running. No destination, no plan. He's just running." They find Yuri Konstantinovich Morozov on September 24th, 3 days after Anna Karin's recovery, in a small boarding house in Hirtshals, Denmark's northernmost port town. He has made no attempt to disguise himself, used his real name to register, paid in Soviet rubles because his supply of Danish kroner has run out. When police enter his room at 06:30, he is sitting on the bed, fully dressed, his Soviet diplomatic passport on the nightstand beside him. He does not resist. He asks one question: "Is the girl all right?" They tell him yes. He nods and stands, holding out his hands for handcuffs. The declassification of Operation Fimbulvinter documents begins in 1995, 10 years after the events, when Swedish-Russian relations have thawed sufficiently for limited intelligence sharing. The first documents released are routine surveillance reports, border crossing records, police communications, the bureaucratic infrastructure of the investigation. The deeper files: SAPO's analysis of Morozov's psychology, the connections to Directiva 847-S85, the full details of Maj-Britt Holmström's double agent operation remain classified until 2017, when Swedish authorities release a comprehensive report on Cold War intelligence operations. The 2017 report reveals several facts that were not public knowledge in 1985. Yuri Morozov was not a trained KGB officer. He was a legitimate cultural attaché who had been recruited by the KGB in 1982 for low-level intelligence work: document handling, courier services, translation. His relationship with Ingrid Svensson in 1977 was genuine, unconnected to any intelligence operation. His decision to extract his daughter was entirely his own initiative, unauthorized and unknown to KGB leadership until after his arrest. Directiva 847-S85 did exist, and did call for resolution of compromised relationships. However, Moscow Center's definition of resolution was diplomatic reassignment and relationship termination, not the violent, appropriate measures that Morozov imagined. His interpretation of the directive was based on paranoia, stress, and the KGB's culture of fear, a culture that encouraged officers to assume the worst and act preemptively. Katarina Svensson, Morozov's actual daughter, was never in danger. She lived in Stockholm until 1994, when she moved to London for university. She is now a professor of international relations at King's College, publishing under her married name. She has declined all interview requests about her father. Ingrid Svensson gave one interview to Swedish television in 1998. She said, "He was a good man once. I loved him. What he did to that child was terrible, but I think he was trying to do something good. He was just wrong about everything." Anna-Karin Bergström, who has also declined interviews, is listed in Swedish records as having immigrated to Canada in 2003. Public records show she works in early childhood education in Vancouver. In a single email response to a researcher in 2019, she wrote, "I remember being scared. I remember a man who seemed sad. I remember my mother coming to get me. I don't want to remember anything else." Maj-Britt Holmström's identity as a SAPO double agent was not publicly revealed until 2017. Her operation against Soviet intelligence networks in Stockholm continued until 1987, when KGB suspicions, unrelated to the Morozov incident, made further work impossible. She received Sweden's highest civilian honor in 2018 in a closed ceremony attended by 3 serving cabinet ministers and the director of SAPO. Yuri Konstantinovich Morozov was not charged with espionage. Danish and Swedish authorities determined his actions were not connected to official intelligence work. He was charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, and illegal border crossing. His trial in Copenhagen in 1986 lasted 3 days. He pleaded guilty to all charges. The prosecutor asked for 12 years. The defense argued for psychological evaluation and reduced sentence based on Morozov's belief he was protecting his daughter. The judge sentenced him to 9 years in Vridsløselil State Prison, with possibility of parole after 6. During the trial, Morozov made one statement: "I thought I was saving my daughter. I destroyed everything instead. I am sorry for what I did to Anna-Karin Bergström and her mother. There is nothing else to say." The Soviet Union revoked Morozov's citizenship in 1986. His wife in Moscow divorced him in absentia. His 2 sons from that marriage were told their father had defected to the West and should be considered dead. Morozov served 7 years and 4 months of his sentence. He was released in May 1993, stateless, carrying a Danish refugee travel document. He moved to a small apartment in Odense and worked as a translator for a legal services company. He never attempted to contact Katarina, though he was legally permitted to do so after his release. On November 15th, 2009, Yuri Morozov died of heart failure in Odense University Hospital. He was 62 years old. His obituary in the local newspaper described him as a former diplomat and translator who lived quietly in our community for many years. 3 people attended his funeral: his landlord, a colleague from the translation company, and Bertil Engström, the retired merchant seaman from Aalborg, who was 87 years old and who told no one why he felt obligated to attend. There was one other mourner who did not attend the funeral but sent flowers. The delivery card was signed K with no return address. The flowers were white lilies. The locked file sits in SAPO's secure archive in Stockholm, classification level Cosmic Top Secret, scheduled for declassification review in 2035. The file is designated Fimbulvinter Final Assessment and contains 12 pages of analysis written by Gunnar Ekström in 1987, 2 years after the operation concluded. The final paragraph reads, "The Morozov case represents a category of intelligence failure not adequately addressed in current doctrine. The failure that occurs when an individual correctly identifies a threat, correctly develops a countermeasure, and correctly executes the countermeasure, but does so based on incorrect information. Morozov's operational security was excellent. His planning was thorough. His execution showed significant skill under pressure. He failed because he was trying to solve a problem that did not exist and save a person who was not in danger. This raises a question for which I have no answer. How do we protect against threats born not from enemy action, but from our own misunderstanding? How do we defend against operations that begin with a lie we tell ourselves? The question remains unanswered. The file remains locked. In basement storage, marked with archival codes and access restrictions, sits a cardboard box containing evidence from the investigation: border crossing photographs, hotel receipts, telephone records, and one item that was never introduced at trial because its relevance was unclear. A Pobeda watch, Soviet-made, stopped at 1843, the moment Yuri Morozov's life diverged from the path he intended. The moment he knocked on the door of apartment 3B, instead of apartment 4C, the moment careful planning gave way to terrible mistake. The watch was found in Morozov's Aalborg apartment, left on the dresser when he fled. Danish police cataloged it as evidence, transferred it to Swedish authorities, who filed it with other investigation materials. It has not been wound since September 17, 1985. Its hands remain frozen at 1843, marking the precise instant when a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter became a stranger's nightmare, when love and fear and Cold War paranoia collided in a Stockholm apartment building, when the distance between intention and outcome expanded to contain 4 days, 2 countries, and the destruction of multiple lives. The watch sits in the dark archive, its stopped hands testimony to the immutable truth of intelligence work. Perfect execution means nothing if the mission itself is wrong. The mechanisms are precise, the engineering is sound, but if you're trying to measure the wrong time in the wrong place for the wrong reasons, all the precision in the world will not save you. On Götgatan Street in Stockholm, the building still stands. Apartment 3B has different residents now. Apartment 4C has different residents now. The streetlights create the same patterns on wet pavement that Lisa Holm photographed in 1985. The distance between the 2 apartments remains exactly what it has always been. 1 floor, 12 feet of vertical space, an infinitesimal gap that proved wide enough to swallow careers, destroy families, and transform a father's love into a stranger's crime. September 17th comes every year. The sun sets at approximately the same time. The temperature hovers around 11 degrees Celsius. Children walk home from school. Babysitters step out to retrieve board games, and somewhere in the vast machinery of intelligence services and diplomatic missions and Cold War tensions, someone makes a calculation based on incomplete information. Someone interprets a directive with paranoid certainty. Someone decides they must act immediately to prevent a catastrophe that exists only in their imagination. The watch remains stopped at 1843, waiting for someone to wind it, to set it forward, to make it useful again. But it has been 39 years, and no one has touched it. In the dark archive, time stands still, frozen at the moment of divergence, the instant when everything went wrong and nothing could be undone. In Vancouver, a woman who teaches young children sometimes thinks about a man who seemed sad. In London, a professor of international relations keeps white lilies on her desk and does not explain why. In Stockholm, a retired intelligence analyst named Gunnar Ekström, now 93 years old, occasionally wakes from dreams where he is trying to explain something important, but the words won't come, where he is trying to reach someone, but his feet won't move, where he is watching a stopped watch and knowing, with absolute certainty, that if he could just wind it forward by 60 seconds, if he could just make it show 1844 instead of 1843, everything would be different. But the watch cannot be wound backward. The apartments cannot be renumbered. The man who stood in the autumn twilight, checking his Soviet timepiece, preparing to knock on a door, cannot choose differently. The moment is fixed, preserved in archived documents and declassified reports, and the memories of people who wish they could forget. Somewhere in the Stockholm night, a streetlight catches rain on pavement. Somewhere in the machinery of international affairs, an intelligence officer reviews surveillance reports and wonders what they might mean. Somewhere in the silent archive, a stopped watch marks time that no longer passes, measuring a distance that cannot be crossed, testifying to the permanent consequences of temporary confusion. The watch says 1843. It will always say 1843. And every day, in the real world where time moves forward relentlessly, It is already too late to change what happens next.